I'm Paul Ogden.
And this is February 23rd, 2013.
You had to look at your notes on that, right, Mark?
I have to do that.
Yes.
I always want to make sure I get the right year. Of course, you're a Republican, Paul, so you have to look at the right century.
It's the 1950s.
We were streaming to you live from Harry C's. It's at 5055 South Dearborn in Indianapolis. It's a marvelous place.
It is marvelous.
It's an excellent menu. Really, really neat jukebox, too. Our guest today, and we'll have another guest panelist here in a minute, Gary Welsh of Advance Indiana. Gary, welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Gary is a blogger and an attorney,
yes,
as we are, in the special club.
And we're being carried live, streaming live on Indiana Talks. Indiana Talks is a network of talk shows that are based in Indiana, and Gary Snyder started it. You can go to indianatalks.com and listen to the show or catch it on Live 365. But if you go to indianatalks.com, their website, there's a donate button. I need to move more to the left. There's a donate button on there, and if you hit the donate button, you can contribute money so that Gary Snyder can purchase equipment and stuff for the network. We have our own equipment.
Part of the money goes to IMS, too, I think.
Oh, yeah, we'll get to that.
That's not true.
Well, no, they get enough money. Of course, I mean, they jump when they. Well, we'll get to that. Also, if you'd like, you can buy my e-novel. It's $1 Billion Balls. It's available on Amazon.com for $2.99, and it's a story about college basketball and corruption and betting and stuff like that. And we're here today. The main topic we're going to talk about, or a focal topic, is mass transit in Indianapolis and Indiana. And Gary, you've blogged about that, haven't you?
Yes.
And have you ever ridden the bus in Indianapolis?
I have a couple of times, and it wasn't a pleasant experience.
It's really kind of difficult to navigate.
I haven't in recent years, but this was when I first moved to Indianapolis and was in law school. I tried riding the bus a few times, and it was not.
Where are you from?
Convenient. I'm from Illinois originally. I moved here
from Abdul's home
in 1990 to attend law school downtown at IU School of Law, which I still
IU School of Law at Indianapolis.
The name I still use to refer to it.
Although it originally was a DePauw University School of Law.
Yeah, that was.
Yes, I think it was like a Harrison School of Law.
It was Benjamin Harrison School of Law. And then it became Indianapolis, Indiana University School of Law at Indianapolis, and has remained the same.
So was DePauw before it was Harrison?
Yeah. The IU School of Law at Indianapolis started out at DePauw, and then DePauw didn't want to didn't see a future in the field of law, I guess. A bunch of our alums went into it, but we didn't want to have our own law school. I don't think that there would have been the same attraction for people getting clerk jobs in Greencastle as there,
that's true.
In Indianapolis. You blogged about mass transit, though, and there's a bill in front of the legislature right now. Paul's blogged about mass transit.
Some, not as much as Gary.
And I have a little bit, but mainly it's personal experience and anecdotal matters.
Yeah.
What's the bill that they're trying to pursue?
Well, the bill is House Bill 1011 that's sponsored by Representative Jerry Torr, a Republican from Carmel, and he's got several co-sponsors, including several members of our Indianapolis delegation. The Metropolitan Mass Transit proposal is largely being pushed by Mayor Greg Ballard here in Indianapolis.
Okay,
and
Mayor Ballard?
Yes.
I thought Ryan Bond was mayor.
Okay, well,
okay.
I can
That's
see
a
how
running joke.
I can understand how you would make that mistake. But Indianapolis's mayor and Carmel's mayor were the two first regional mayors to really get behind the proposal, and so most of the support for it lies within Marion County and Hamilton County, although the proposed metropolitan transit area would encompass all of the collar counties surrounding
the so-called donut counties.
Yes, the entire everything that's essentially considered a part of the metropolitan area.
Okay, just a question, and maybe I sound silly when I ask this, but so basically they're saying, well, the entire area will contribute to it, but basically the development and the benefit from it will be in a corridor from Indianapolis up to Noblesville?
Initially, I mean, the plan has gone. There was initially, when this plan was rolled out 2 or 3 years ago, it was a much more ambitious plan that had a lot more rail lines that spread out in all directions from the city going out to the west, to the south,
and then people started
and
actually
to the
doing
east.
the numbers.
Yes, and then they realized that that the dollar impact of such a proposal was going to have such a sticker shock, so they rolled it back to encompass just one 23-mile light rail line that would extend from downtown Indianapolis to Noblesville. And then the rest of it is a retooling of Indianapolis's existing Indigo to include more routes and what they call, express bus routes that operate sort of like rail lines with dedicated right-of-ways for the buses to run, that theoretically allow them to move at a faster clip along designated routes, and then to stretch further out into the suburbs. But the initial plan looks like it's mostly focused towards expanding towards Hamilton County right now.
And for listeners and viewers, because this show is carried on Indiana Talks, that's audio, but we're also on Ustream and YouTube, and that's obviously audio and video. But for people who are out there who are not from the Indianapolis area, Indianapolis is the state capital, but Hamilton County is kind of like about 2 o'clock on the clock dial. That direction is where they're talking about developing it. That's the direction where Noblesville is.
Noblesville Fishers. Yeah.
And Noblesville Fishers has been an area of development the last 15 or 20 years or so, largely upper middle class white development in terms of residential, and a lot of commercial, not much industrial, but a lot of commercial crap. I mean,
Well, and it also happens to be that that's where there's an existing nickel plate rail line so they don't have to worry about acquiring all the additional right-of-way to start from scratch. You've got an existing rail line that stretches, and in fact, the train that operates during while the state fair is on from Noblesville down to the state fair, for example, that's on that nickel plate line, and that's what would be designated for this 23-mile light rail corridor.
And when you're talking light rail, you're talking about a difference between what we usually see as far as trains on the track. When you see a CSX freight train, that's heavy rail. And that's like what Amtrak runs. That's a heavy rail line. A light rail would be along the lines of something we saw in Denver. That was solely for passenger, and it literally is light. I mean, it's a lot lighter than the
That's
trains
correct.
that run.
Yeah.
But a couple of things I had read. I actually prepared for this show. I know Paul.
I generally don't.
Yeah, but I'd read.
Take the Larry King approach. That was his approach.
A local writer, Andrea Neal, had written a column January 17th of this year about Indy lacks critical mass for mass transit. And that she quotes one study that says, put simply, mass transit needs mass, i.e. density. And we don't have it here in Indianapolis.
And that has been one of my chief criticisms of this metropolitan mass transit plan. I begin with the fact we do have an existing mass transit system that runs throughout Marion County that we refer to as Indigo, that in its earlier years, when I first moved to Indianapolis, was called Metro, and then they sort of rebranded and tried to remarket themselves to the public, and I think that they did there have been some improvements in the system. I think it is a better bus system than it was.
Have you ridden it?
Well, they are. I'm going by what the users tell me that do rely on it. And I have talked to some of the people who do ride it on a daily basis and what they communicate to me about it. So I think that they have, I'm going to give them some credit that they have made some improvements to it. But it still is a very lacking system. Having said that, and we are talking about the area that is most densely populated that Indigo serves. It has about a $65 million budget. We fund it with about $30 million of that comes from property taxes. About $12 million comes from the state in mass transit assistance. Another 10 or 12 million comes from the federal government. And I believe that the percentage that is actually paid by the users, the people who ride the bus system, is about 17 or 18%.
And that's about $1.35 now, I think, one way, or $1.
It's higher than that now.
It's if it works for you, there's no question that if you're near a bus route and you can make it work for you, well, it's cheaper than driving a car easily.
And my experience with transit like that, I mean, I lived in Chicago, and I lived in Chicago, and I lived later in a suburb. When I lived in Chicago, the bus stop was a half a block away, didn't have to own a car, didn't have to worry about the car being vandalized on the street or even hit by another car or a hailstorm or anything like that, didn't have to pay insurance. The bus cost 90 cents, I think, one way, and you could buy a monthly pass for like $40 or $50. You could jump on the bus and go to Wrigley or the Art Institute or, you know, Science and Industry Museum, any of those things. Of course, that was Chicago. And in the suburbs, they had regional trains, so you could ride the regional train, which was like a regular heavy rail train, but it was like
the metro train, I think is what they call it.
Well, then I was riding. It was Burlington Northern. I mean, it was still individual train lines. The thing is, it was dependable. If you lived in the city and you were at a bus stop and it was during daylight hours or regular hours, early evening, you could depend upon a bus being there, you know, maybe 10, 15 minutes apart. And if it was rush hour, maybe 5 minutes apart. So there was no doubt about your being able to have that as a dependable means of transportation. And here, the buses are on an hourly schedule, and then I think they stop at one point during the evening.
Right.
And so it's you know, you have to kind of figure out your life around what the bus schedule is.
And that was the few times that I tried riding the bus, that was the problem, on catching it at the appointed times, and it seemed like you spent too much time waiting for a bus to come. You were spending more time waiting for your bus than you did actually riding it to get to where you wanted to go. And then the way the bus system is laid out, you got to keep, you know, doing transfers, you know, getting off, knowing where to get off and catch another bus, and you know, if the weather is inclement that particular day, you know, there are so many reasons that people can find not to ride the bus, and they just, culturally, Indianapolis is not a mass transit town, and that's and you know, my concern is if you can't convince the people that live in the most dense populated areas of the metropolitan area that mass transit is something of value to them, how are you going to convince these people who chose to move out into the further suburbs? You know, they invest in expensive SUVs and automobiles that they love getting in the car and commuting back and forth to work.
And not interrupt, but I want to point out we are joined now by our other guest panelist, Matt Stone,
who apparently just woke up.
No, his flight.
It was a fun drive here. Yeah,
his flight just arrived.
Well, yeah, I couldn't. I missed the bus, so I had to get here by my car.
Mark, I would point out too. I've ridden the bus probably most recently. When in November, I rode the bus from downtown to the airport, and they run fairly often there. It was
which they ended that. They ended that.
No,
bus
it
route.
was different. It was the regular bus route. It wasn't the express bus route. To the
okay.
airport.
Well,
which actually was like $1.75, and it was well worth it. one of the big problems, though, and people don't really talk about it, is your wait for the bus, where you wait at the bus stop, and some of those, I'm not sure how to describe this to be politically correct. It's
it doesn't
first
matter.
of all, they're not shielded from the weather.
Not many of them are. I was between cars a few years back, and I fortunately at the time my father lived in Broderville, so I was able to just hop on the bus on College. But there are bus stops that are practically in somebody's yard. I guess if there was a sidewalk there, that's where you'd be waiting. But and there was a part on Kessler that there's no sidewalk, and there's a bus stop, but you're pretty much sitting in someone's further end of the yard. I had no complaints about the bus time, but if you want to get somewhere after 6, it's much harder because as you go outside of downtown and maybe some parts of the east side, after 6 o'clock, the buses become less and less frequent. When I was going to get my car, going to purchase a car, what I would do is I would go to Keystone at the Crossing where the bus ends, and then I would just walk to 96th Street. Because the bus didn't go beyond there. I guess that's the county boundary or something like that. And that's going to be the challenge because in many places it's a good 1.5 miles, 2 miles, 3 miles before you hit a bus stop.
And then what's the point of taking the bus at that point? Well, I was interested a couple of years ago, and maybe it was more than a couple of years ago, 5 or 6. There was a town hall type meeting of the board of directors of Indigo, whatever manifestation it was at the time. And someone in the audience asked the members of the board if any of them regularly rode the bus.
None of them did.
None of them did.
I recall that.
How can you have someone operate something that's supposed to be so functional and integral to infrastructure as mass transit if you're going to use it? And none uses it at all. I just thought that was mind-blowing.
That's what I got a big kick out of it when the Indy Connect group, that's the umbrella name for the...
And I invited... I tried to contact them and invite someone to be on the show, and
it was kind of last minute.
Yes.
Yeah, it was a couple of days.
They got a $2 million grant from the Federal Transit Administration to spend selling the public on this mass transit proposal. So all those TV commercials and radio commercials and
the flyers,
newspaper mailers and so on, those are being financed with federal taxpayer dollars.
Yeah, I have a problem with government money being used to finance.
I don't know if when they ran the TV commercial, I recognized most of the people in the ad, and they were attorneys at big law firms, they were lobbyists, they were people who worked for the entities that were promoting it. And I had to laugh. Even the one handicapped person they had is actually an attorney at Ice Miller, well,
if you're going to air a public commercial like that, you got to hit the demographics correctly and precisely, so there's no question about that.
And 2 points on that. One is if the demographics are for what they're going to improve the line for, and that's upper middle class white people who live in Hamilton County, then they hit it right on the head for that commercial. But if what they're doing is wanting to look at people who ride the bus in this city and generally across the United States are dependent upon mass transit, they're looking at people who aren't making as much money, who have to take the bus because they can't afford a car and they need to get to their jobs downtown. And we have jobs downtown that don't pay very much, that we need people to fill, and so we really need to have mass transit to function.
Right.
Well, I think you need some type of public transportation. I think mass transit inherently connect. Yeah, I understand what you're saying, but I think when people hear mass transit, they think rail and they think some of the more modern technology besides bus routes. I think there's less controversy around bus. We can get into the nitty-gritty details of the specific proposal later, and I have complaints about that. But I think there's general support for expanded bus, even this whole bus rapid transit thing. I think there's more of a pushback against rail. And when I got that Indy Connect mailer, it says these are the proposed routes we have, and what it says is it might be a bus rapid transit thing, it might be a traditional bus, it might be rail, and it might be whatever. So there's really, I'm afraid of how much rail is my primary concern at this moment.
Well,
because even though it represents a smaller portion of the entire bill, it's a significant chunk of the finance.
Well,
we got to take a break. Just to announce, this is Civil Discourse Now. We're streaming live from Harry C's, which is at 5055 South Dearborn in Indianapolis. I'm Mark Small.
I'm Paul Ogden.
And this is turning into kind of a sunny February day, which for Indiana, February is normally kind of like a
blah. Great.
Yeah, kind of.
Thank you, global warming.
Yes.
That's a whole nother show.
And we're streaming on Indiana Talks. Indiana Talks is a network of talk shows based in Indiana that Gary Snyder has started. If you go to indianatalks.com, there's a donate button. If you hit that and donate money, it goes to the purchase of equipment for Indiana Talks. And we have our own equipment. We're also on Ustream. You can also buy my e-novel, $1 Billion Balls. It's on Amazon.com. It's about like the tournament. I can't use the acronym. The basketball tournament held annually for college teams. And our guest panelists today are Gary Welsh. Gary blogs on Advance Indiana. And Matt Stone, who blogs on Indie Student.
I'm a recovering blogger, really, at this point.
Recovering blogger.
Yeah.
And Mark, where are we today?
We are at Harry C's. It's at 5055 South Dearborn. It's on the south side of Indianapolis. Has a marvelous menu. It's a really neat place, great jukebox, and highly recommend it. People ought to come here and frequent it.
So
Can we still smoke here, or is this? Or did Beach Grove do their own? Oh, we're not? Okay.
We're close to Beach Grove.
No, there's a pending federal case on that issue, but we can't really discuss that.
Mark, why don't we get into some of the specifics? I know Gary will know those. The dollar amounts, how much it's going to cost, where the money's going to come from.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm glad you brought that.
It's a whole bucket of dollars.
I'm glad you asked that question, Paul, because what we're supposed to rely on is the same information they're providing to the state lawmakers who are voting on this legislation, which is a fiscal statement that's prepared by the Legislative Services Agency. And that's worth the paper it's written on after reading it.
It's a pretty nice paper. Okay.
Initially, the scaled-back version is supposed to cost about $1.3 billion.
Give or take a point
right,
here or there.
But it's to be funded by a local income tax, and the local income tax would be 0.3%.
No. I just want to stop you when I've got a question.
Yeah.
0.3%. And we were talking earlier about how the donut counties would participate in this, like they're
Yes.
being invited to come in and be part of it.
Yes.
People in the donut counties would be assessed that income tax.
No.
Well, that's where I'm going to follow on from there. Everyone would have the chance to take this to a public referendum. If once this legislation passes, then the governing fiscal bodies of each of the counties would submit it to the voters to be voted on at a referendum. Now, initially, it was going to be voted on in a special election this fall, and that would be the only thing that people would come out to vote on. And of course, that was sort of how they did the Wishart referendum a few years ago, and a lot of us complained about that, and they did change it. So now it's going to be, I believe, the general election of 2014.
The Wishart election, though, that was basically where people could turn out to vote on yes or no. I believe that we should spend a lot of money to build a new structure for Wishart Hospital.
Well, it's not Wishart,
to help
it's
all those
something
people
else.
who are
Yeah.
so down and
Yeah,
out,
we went on
injured and
Yeah.
wounded and terminally
Yeah.
ill, and just make lives as good as possible for them.
That's
Now, I've read the referendum language. It's a little bit more transparent this time. I mean,
we want your money. Give it to us.
It is. I think that.
Nothing about puppies
Yeah,
and mother and aunt.
Well, puppy wouldn't get hit by a rail because it's all above
Right.
ground. They
Yeah.
can't get up there.
Yeah, but the problem now becomes, and essentially, they're assuming that it's only going to be voted on in 2014 in Marion County and Hamilton County.
Got to be careful hitting the
Now,
table. It carries.
what is uncertain to me is they really don't give you how much this 0.3% income tax increase will generate. And what we saw, I happened to watch fortunately the House has archived video of the debate of this bill on second reading. And there was a very fascinating amendment offered by Representative Eric Turner, who's in the House Republican leadership. He is from Cicero Township, which is on the very far northern edge of Hamilton County. In Jackson Township. It borders Howard County.
And Tipton County.
Tipton County, yeah. Tipton's between.
Yeah, Tipton's between Howard and Hamilton.
Oh, okay, all right. So, according to Representative Turner, he defined all these border townships, which is essentially in every regional county, the townships that bordered the areas outside the metropolitan area technically were really more rural than metropolitan, and so they shouldn't have to participate in this. And so he gave an opt-out right for every one of those border townships.
So how would that would they like hold a separate vote?
If the county vote, if they opt out, then when it's submitted to the county voters, those townships will be excluded from the vote.
So who would be opting out? Would township officials? Would their state rep? Or?
Yes, it's the township, as I understand it, I believe it's the township boards could.
They have township boards in those townships?
I think I assume every township has a township advisory board or whatever, but they would be allowed to opt out. So you've got all of those, and then right after his amendment was adopted on a voice vote. So I don't know what the fiscal impact of taking out all of those are from it.
This is from the Indie Connect website, and like they have frequently asked questions. Okay, this is the internet age, so it's the FAQ. How will the tax affect the average resident of Marion or Hamilton County? Answer. The proposed tax of 0.3%, 0.3%, would only apply to taxable income, such as wages and income, just like the current local income tax does. So after taking into account typical exemptions and deductions, a family of four making $50,000 a year would pay about $10 a month for this new transit system. The tax would not affect most seniors or those out of work, since Social Security benefits and unemployment benefits are generally excluded from state and local taxes. Wait, they're talking about raising a big chunk of change, and all of a sudden they're starting to eliminate people from whom they'd be seeking this big chunk of change. They don't exactly know how much it is they're going to need.
What's it say about seniors again, Mark?
Oh, seniors would be exempt because presumptively they're getting Social Security.
Seniors, on average, have higher incomes than do any other group. I know people think they don't, but they do. Even if you look at their income as opposed to accumulated assets. I'm sorry I banged the table there, Mark. But the seniors, as a group, over 65, have the highest income. So pension and other.
So they're kind of candy coating that.
Yeah.
Right. But they definitely are. Yeah.
But Indiana's income tax is a very flat income tax. It doesn't have a lot of the exemptions like you have at the federal level. So there's more people who pay it than pay the federal tax. So people that might, and there's a large, what is it, something like 47% of the population doesn't pay federal income tax anymore.
Well, you can't deduct sales taxes.
They do. But I mean, but with all the different credits and deductions and everything that are built into the federal tax law, you remove a lot of lower income people, lots of lower income people off of it, whereas the state income tax
you can't deduct charitable.
And I was a little bit, and I was frankly very surprised by their choice of an income tax to do it. And one of the concerns I had is that Indianapolis already has a relatively high local income tax in addition to the state income tax. which gives people an incentive to move out into these suburban counties where if you make a lot of income, why not live in a suburban area where the schools are better and the services are better and the taxes are lower and so we're piling on another income tax here. So I was a little bit surprised that they did it. Most of the places they will choose to do it through. They traditionally did it through sales taxes or gas taxes. They're doing it less on gas taxes now because automobiles are getting a lot more efficient, and so they're not. You're not getting growth in gas tax revenues like you get with a sales tax.
I think one of the. I'm wondering why someone hasn't asked the Indiana Department of Revenue to estimate how much is going to come from here, because I think the suspicion that I have anyway is we're going to see a lot. When we know, and Indy Connect has publicly said, a lot of this is going to be federally financed. There'll be incentives and stuff like that. And yes, that's exactly right, Paul. I mean, we've seen this over the past 2-3 years where we have this government by mandate with the fiscal cliff and all that other jazz. What happens when there is a government shutdown or a budget or something happens to a grant we're relying on, and all of a sudden that grant isn't there, or it gets located to another area, or it gets awarded to another city? Then what do we do? And at least when we have these fiscal crises in the city with like IMPD, we can at least move money around from another city department. You can't do that so much with a municipal corporation.
Well, I take umbrage with your describing the fiscal cliff as all that jazz. I think jazz music has a very positive nature in our society. I'd say it's another type of music, and don't go
Appalachian.
But it's not jazz. So let's just keep that out.
Mark's sarcasm.
No, not at all. A couple of other things about this, about the money involved. First of all, you have Mayor Ballard and the Mayor of Carmel talking about financial matters, and that's scary. I mean, because like the Mayor of Carmel gave an estimate of I think when they started it's the Palladium up there, and they were going to start building it, I think he gave an estimate of $4 was what it was going to cost or something, and it ended up costing.
And now it's projected to never make a profit within the foreseeable future.
Well, never.
Never.
And the thing is, it's like selling out, and they're still not making a profit.
And one of my complaints about it is that this plan is mostly focused on. I mean, they claim that there's some benefits for Indianapolis, but let's face it, this is really built towards Hamilton County right now, with the rail line, and the $1.3 billion that they initially planned to spend. Now, whether this tax actually raises that much or not, I don't know, and that's a floating number, and I don't think they know. I think that the idea is you get it approved, and then you worry about it later. And then you just raise taxes and we have to because we've already invested this amount of money in it. But they're saying that about half of that $1.3 billion is going to be on that one rail line going from downtown to Noblesville. Now, one of the things that I have learned in all the reading and studying that I've done on light rail systems for mass transit is that they always come in way over budget. They never come in under budget. Oh. And I mean, we're talking, 40, 50, 75, 100% more than the anticipated costs. Now, I found a city that's similar in size to Indianapolis that built almost an identical rail line running in the same direction from downtown out into the suburbs, Austin, Texas. They've got a rail line that runs from downtown out to, I think it's called Leander. I hadn't even heard of it. Yep. But it's about a 27, 28-mile rail line. Their metropolitan mass transit system, Indigo costs $65 million to operate. Their mass transit system on an annual basis costs $275 million to operate. And a big chunk, of course, is this rail line. And I studied it. And if you wanted to ride that rail, it ran once every half hour. So it only ran in 30-minute increments, and it only ran. It would start, early enough in the morning to get you to work, and then, if you didn't catch it by 6:30, you were out of luck. It ran later into the evenings on Friday and Saturday. It didn't, but on Saturday it didn't even start until like 3 in the afternoon, and then it doesn't even run on Sunday.
What that sounds like is it's made for the residents of that outer suburban community, and it's not so much for people living in Dallas to get to work in that suburban community, for the residents of that suburban community to get to Dallas to get to their work, and then Austin, and then get back home, because otherwise, who's going to go there after 6
and
o'clock?
it just so happened that the Texas state government had done they have this sunset law on every government-funded program, and while the mass transit system for Austin didn't sunset, it had to have a periodic review, and that most recent periodic review was very critical of it, for saying that they had been very poor at estimating how much it was going to cost, and they focused a lot on the rail system, that it cost much more than they had ever expected. The personal services cost of all the employees that worked for those costs had skyrocketed. I noticed that I think that for Indigo, like 30 million of the 65 million is for personal services.
Well, personnel.
Yes, so that's a very costly component. There was a lot of people, and then they were particularly critical that they were paying. I think they were paying salaries to executives of their mass transit of over $500,000 a year, and that there just was a lack of accountability. Now, what we're doing is, if we create this metropolitan mass transit area, and let's say we just do it with Hamilton County, Indigo ceases to exist, but its taxing authority for the property tax continues in place. And then you have this unelected Metropolitan Transit Authority that's going to be made up of people appointed by the mayor and the county commissioners and so on, that will control its fate. And so you know what our frustrations are with the Capital Improvement Board and the Airport Authority and so on. And we're building this train to Noblesville.
What frustration?
When the cheapest and most obvious rail line, if you were going to build one first, the one to me that sticks out like a sore thumb that you would build is, because you have the rail line already extending out there, is just to take it from Union Station to the airport, so that you have and they actually wanted to do that, but guess who opposed that? The Airport Authority, because they thought that if we made it too convenient for people to hop on the train from downtown, that people wouldn't be driving their cars and parking in the parking lots, and they would lose all those revenues. And so that'd be horrible.
And people would be saving energy too. I got to cut in here for a break. This is Civil Discourse Now. I'm Mark Small.
And I'm Paul Ogden.
This is February 23rd, 2013. I had to look at the second time and make sure. We're streaming live to you from Harry C's at 5055 South Dearborn on the south side of Indianapolis. Marvelous place, excellent menu. Kurt, how's the food? Good. And we've got our live studio audience here. A live audience. We're carried on Indiana Talks. It's a statewide network on the internet of Indiana-based talk shows. You can go to the indianatalks.com website. There's a donate button. Hit that, and money goes for improvement of software and hardware for the network, although we own our own stuff. You can also buy my book, $1 Billion Balls, on Amazon.com. It's an e-novel for $2.99. We're talking about mass transportation and urban transportation. I use mass transit as kind of a catch-all with our guest panelists. Gary Welsh, who is at Advance Indiana, his blog. He's also an Indianapolis lawyer. And Matt Stone, who is on Indy Student. And we were talking, Gary was just saying the common sense approach, etc., to how you would do mass transit here. Well, first of all, I don't think common sense comes into play necessarily when you're dealing with Indianapolis. But secondly, if you're talking about that much money on letting of contracts for doing anything, you're going to have a whole pile of sugar here.
We're going to be looking. I bet we're going to be looking at a bunch of 20-year, 30-year, 40-year long contracts. And what I'm interested to know, kind of like in the behind the scenes, where did all these mostly Republican legislators have this come to Jesus moment? Because a year ago they were not pushing this very. I mean, there was a Republican co-sponsor of the bill, but this was not a huge priority. It wasn't gaining a lot of traction. It got shut down in the right to work controversy. And Indy Connects have been pushing this for several years. This is their first time around. And I'm just wondering where this come to Jesus moment was for a lot of Republican legislators. You're not seeing Governor Pence, at least not lambast this proposal.
Well,
so I'm just wondering we all know Ballard's talked about this for years, but I'm wondering what's happened to everyone else.
Let's not forget the TIF district that they were talking
Yeah,
about creating around the
they're-
rail line.
They've created a TIF district around the rail line.
Which could go to development.
And let me just get back to the point that I was kind of making a minute ago. My old man was a contractor. My brother was a contractor. My grandfather was a contractor. And I can tell you, when you've got that much money being let out on contracts, you've got contractors who are donating to campaigns and donating to candidates to get them to do what they want them to do. And I'm not coming right out and saying corruption. I'm heavily implying it. But the second aspect of it is, who does the blog Unigov? Does anybody?
It's not Unigov. It's Indy.
No, it's Unigov. Somebody's got Unigov.
I've never seen that.
I know there's a username. There's a guy on Blogger who goes by that username.
I think that's is that Eugene Fisk?
I don't know, but
Okay.
this just started. It just came up in January. It just came out.
Could I see that?
Yeah, hold on. I just
Yeah.
want to read this quote, and then I'll hand it to you. One of the things it says in here is the plan, meaning the transportation plan, is utterly racist. The bulk of the construction money will go for expanding the line from downtown to the Fishers-Noblesville border. Nearly everybody who lives out there is white and has a car. People moved to Fishers to get away from black people and IPS. If they choose to work downtown and live in Fishers, they should suffer in traffic or move back closer. I think that's kind of a valid point.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, the problem is that Ballard's meme on this, and I kind of poke fun at it. He goes, "If you don't build it, they won't come."
Right.
You know, it was
Well, we've
such an
heard that
original
argument for
thought,
years.
such an original thought, and I was shocked when you actually looked at statistics in cities where they have a very comprehensive mass transit system, like Chicago. Only 5% of commuters ride mass transit daily, and I guess I'm not surprised by that, because what I couldn't understand is, how can you spend all of this money on mass transit, but every time you drive up there, they're building new expressways, they're widening the lanes, they're putting in more interchanges, they're connecting putting a north-south connector from this expressway to that one, and so on. And it's just mind-boggling how many road projects that they have, and yet there is still all this congestion that you get into. Even up there, they have lots of toll roads, which provide a disincentive to drive, because those tolls get very expensive. And yet people insist, the vast majority of people are getting in their car and driving rather than take advantage of a vast system of trains and buses they have there that really connect up. I mean, and their trains go, 50 miles out from the...
I live there, and I can tell you the L goes all the way up to Evanston and all the way down to 96th Street, I think it is, or 95th Street, and it goes all the way out west to almost to Riverside.
And you can ride the train to South Bend.
Well, see, there you're talking the whole rail system, because if you go to the Jackson Street station, you can catch the South Shore, which is an electric train, and go all the way across to South Bend. If you go down to either Union Station or Northwestern Station downtown, depending upon, they had different lines when I was up there, but it's the same thing. You can go all the way up to Lake Forest. You can go all the way out to DeKalb and Aurora. So you're talking about, 50 miles one way, 40 miles another. Now, in terms of the percentage ridership, that's something that I need to see the methodology whereby they derive those numbers. I worked downtown in Chicago. I lived at one point just off Lincoln Park and another point in a suburb. And I can say with pretty good confidence that the majority of the people I knew didn't drive. I mean, I knew people who had cars, but it was really expensive to park downtown because you didn't just park at the curb. Either your employer provided a parking lot for you so you didn't have to worry about paying for it, or you were making so much money that you were a student. There were one of those exceptions. Otherwise, when I'd catch the bus just off in Lincoln Park to go down to work in the morning and coming back, there'd be 3 or 4 buses in a row during rush hour running, nose to tail. And sometimes the steps up into the bus would be occupied by riders, people standing. And the L's would be crowded. I mean, people were riding. And sure, there are a lot of people driving every place up there, but mass transit, when it works right, it's marvelous because you didn't have to own a car. There was some inconvenience on doing schedules if you wanted to go out to a suburb, but otherwise, you go down to the L, if it's during 6 a.m. to 8 p.m., there's going to be regular trains coming by every few minutes, and you can get anywhere you need to go relatively inexpensively.
Well, and one of the things that you saw happen in Chicago, there was a renaissance of the whole loop area, where you saw vast numbers of very upper middle to high income people move back downtown into high-rise condominiums. I mean, they've built. I mean, it's just incredible how many condominiums have been built, and so people are living within walking distance a lot of time
literally.
to work.
But see, I lived there before the boom, especially south of south of the whatever was coming in the Congress, I guess. The Congress south of there, a big boom went in because they were tearing out a bunch of old buildings and putting up condos, or they were redoing lofts and putting in apartments. Right. But I was living there before that point. The thing was, the city's culture, you had, the L was built for the 1892 Columbian Exposition. So people have gotten accustomed to having this city transit available to them so that they can travel wherever they need to go. Here, we had streetcars at one point that just kind of crapped out in the 50s.
I think a motor company bought them up and basically derailed the tracks.
Yeah, that was on the interurban. GM did that because we had a statewide track system, a rail system that was relatively inexpensive.
So we've gone 40, 50, 60 years without something like that, and you're right, the culture isn't there.
Yeah, and not only that, if you read Understanding Media by Marshall McLuhan, he describes how people's culture developed on rails. Well, when you've got cars and people become dependent upon cars, they don't have to be near the rail, and so you have this sprawl of development. And there was no overall plan for an urban design of how Indianapolis was going to be structured anytime. I think when they first laid out the city, the original 1 square mile, they had the circle and then the spokes coming out. That's probably about the last overall urban planning that's been done in this city.
One of the things that the mayor concentrates on is not people being able to ride and get around. Economic development. He said, that's the key. Economic development, particularly the rail line. So I think we need to talk about that because that would be what he would say. This is all about economic development.
But who's going to ride it?
But yeah, and that's the problem, because the irony is that the area of the metropolitan area where the most money has been spent on highway improvements is this corridor where the light rail line is proposed to be built. I mean, there have been vast sums of money spent in that area, expanding I-465, I-69, express routes linking into those major arteries. The Keystone roundabout projects that Mayor Brainerd has won national fame for doing, that helps move the traffic, and that's greatly. Keystone was traffic moved much slower before that. It works great. I mean, traffic does move down Keystone much quicker, but it seems like all of this other money we're spending works counter to now shifting gears and trying to say, well, now we need to do mass transit. Well, you've done all of this. You have all of these projects still on the books that you're planning to do, that you haven't taken off the books, but you want to raise taxes and invest all this money in a mass transit system. And I can't see that unless, on the rail line, the problem with that is you're going to have that one rail line. And unless you live right on it.
Yeah, or within walking distance.
Right. Yeah, within walking distance. And you can get from point A to point B without having to take a bus. That's about the only people that are going to ride it.
Yes.
And there's a part of me, I don't want to say this is what it's really all about, but I think that Fred McCarthy mentioned it on his blog, that it's really all about just people want to be able to, it would be fun to take the train down to a Colts game or a Pacers game or whatever, and that's really what it's all about, as opposed to using it as a mass transit commuting tool for the area.
We'll probably have a luxury car where there'll be Wi-Fi and scotch served. While you're going to need to pay a few extra bucks for that.
Yeah. Wait a second. When I commuted in Chicago, the train that went up to Lake Forest had a club car on it, and so you could have drinks. And
and I'm sure you probably bought your own drinks anyway.
Well, no, I'd go through when I was doing the suburbs, and I was living out in the suburbs. I'd go through Union Station, hit the liquor store there, buy a couple of Old Styles and a bag of Eagle roasted nuts, get on the smoking car because people were much more sociable and affable on that, and then ride out to the suburb. But that was a daily thing. And also I worked at Northwestern School of Law, and that was on the lake, and it was probably, it was just off Chicago, it was between Chicago and Superior, and on the lake. That was a number, probably, 20, 25 blocks from the train station. Well, Northwestern and a couple of other employers had a school bus. It was a school bus, and you pay 50 cents each way to transport from Union Station and Northwestern, because the station, up to the law school, and then at the end of the workday, the bus would take you back. And so that was one means by which you could get to and from the train, even though you worked someplace else. But also you're dealing with Chicago, where they have commuter boats. Because you can commute on the boat on the river, which I always thought was cool.
Well, touching on something that Gary said earlier about projects that have already been done, one of the things that I noticed during the parking meter sale was how how hard it is to remove parking meters, to change where they are, to close them down. And I think there's going to be a legitimate concern about how much money we're going to have to fork over to ACS if meters need to be relocated or shut down for construction, or if they need to be, or a whole block of meters might need to be moved somewhere else altogether.
Well,
that's going to hinder.
But then even
not just rail, but for bus stops and stuff like that.
But even taking it another step, why is the city subsidizing the construction of all these parking garages to accommodate people who are driving their cars if you're wanting to encourage people to use mass transit?
Because, as I said a couple minutes ago, my old man was a contractor, my grandfather was a contractor, my brother was a contractor. People donate money to politicians in their campaigns. I did not directly say the word corruption. I never would directly say that. I heavily implied it, and that's kind of that's where it is. We can put up a whole bunch of parking garages. Okay, they do it. So what if it's against?
And we do. And in Indianapolis, one of the things that's always intrigued me is that there is kind of like an elite class of architects and engineers and public finance attorneys and consultants that all make their living off publicly financed projects. And if you notice that they have to keep coming up with a new one every 2 or 3 years to keep all of those people employed. And then if you look at the campaign contribution list for the mayor and the city councilors and your top officials, it reads like a who's who of all of those people who get those contracts to do all these public improvement projects. And so you wonder, is it, are they looking out for the community good, or is it a way of employing themselves and make work for themselves? And the thing is, just making the Indigo better, there's no money in it for them. But if you go and invest a whole bunch of money in a new expanded system, then there's this pot of free money out in Washington that they're just giving away. And they're dangling there. We'll give you all of this money if you just, whether you have any justification for it, you have a solid business plan, it doesn't matter. If you're building new mass transit, there's large piles of money that they're just giving away out in Washington that they don't have to give, they're just borrowing.
You say the magic words and it's given. And when I said corruption, I want to clarify something. I'm not talking about anything that's illegal. I'm talking about something that's endemic in the system, and that is where people can obtain some kind of advantage or some kind of avenue for obtaining money and privileges and benefits from the system by contributing to campaigns and effectuating changes in legislators and other politicians' decision-making based upon those contributions and not upon what's good for the people. And to me, without having a dictionary with me right now and not wanting to power up the netbook, that to me is corruption. When you are contributing something to the system in order to obtain a benefit that's not really the way it's supposed to be done.
And a lot of these are no-bid professional contracts.
That's true.
They steer to the favorite law firm, favorite architecture firm, et cetera, et cetera.
I think going back to the TIF financing of a lot of these districts, I think for the better part, a lot of the outside of the downtown area has kind of escaped TIFs. What I'm concerned is going to see a rail line or a bus line of TIFs just going straight through Hamilton and Marion counties, and then several years down the line, libraries start shortening hours, parks, and all these other township and county organizations that exclusively rely on property taxes, rather than all these other, rather than the traditional city organizations which combine all these other taxes.
But before he explains it, let me just say, they must read what we say on the blogs, because that was one of the areas that we focused on, Pat Andrews and I in particular, was the fact that it was going to allow the Metropolitan Transit Authority to set up TIF areas along the right-of-ways of the rail and the bus rapid transit lines that would capture all the growth in property tax revenues and siphon money from other schools and local governments. There was a second reading amendment offered by Cherish Pryor. I didn't read it, but I did watch it, and she said that it removes the TIF language from it, that some people thought that it was inappropriate, that this unelected authority should have the ability to TIF large areas of and take tax dollars away, and so they did remove it. So whether that stays out of it or not, I don't know, but they did.
We know there's going to be a conference. There'll be some difference between the House and the Senate version, and conference committees can throw all types of stuff back in the mix.
And I need to stop right here because we have to identify ourselves. I'm Mark Small.
I'm Paul Ogden.
You're listening to Civil Discourse Now, which is carried on Indiana Talks. Paul, what's Indiana Talks?
Indiana Talks was set up by Gary Snyder as a network of, I call it a network of Indiana talk shows have been consolidated and put on the Live 365, or sometimes, I don't know if it's 365 Live or Live 365. 365
Live 365.
Live 365, I had it correct. And he has a number of different programs on the show, on the network.
And it's
some
not
of
just
which
political. It's sports and
political,
all types of
sports.
stuff.
I should let you do this. You seem to know more about it, man.
Well, it's a good project. I mean, and some of the shows are carried, on actual traditional radio stations.
Right.
Yeah, and we are streaming to you live from Harry's Seas. It's a 5055 South Dearborn in Indianapolis. We have a live audience here. This is a really nifty place. They have good food, good music. I like their
big screen TVs, Mark. You come here and watch sports
events? Except they had University of Kentucky highlights on above me a little bit ago.
They were showing Indiana State now, so we're okay.
That's good. It's a marvelous place, and our guest panelists today are Gary Welsh. Gary blogs on Advance Indiana, and Matt Stone blogs on Indy Student. Both have been guests on our guest panelists before on the show, and welcome back. And we've been talking about mass transit in Indianapolis, and we started to mention TIFs. And Matt, can anyone explain what a TIF is?
Oh my! Well, I've tried to. Well, TIFs were set up originally. I believe in California they were originally set up.
Well, now you're going into the history of
yes, the history.
Right.
And
it's not saying what they are.
Yes, what they began was originally to develop areas that were not very developed, and to kind of put money back into these communities that need development. Since then, it's expanded to several other areas, and in many states, including Indiana, that whole that needs to be a needs area, or it needs to have some form of economic development has been removed. We have a new TIF now that's in the northeast part of Indianapolis, which is pretty nice looking.
So let me help out. TIF district is created in a certain area, and what it's designed to do is to capture the increased property taxes from development in that area. So they borrow money to develop that area. They pay back the loan, supposedly, from the increased property tax revenue that's captured in the TIF district. If you fall short, though, they have to cut into what's called the base. So you're supposed to just be capturing the increment and using that to pay the loan.
So it's like this. I'm looking at a bare lot. It's like 3 city blocks. Okay, I want to develop on it. Well, how am I going to develop on it? Well, I'm going to build a TIF. Well, I'm going to build a TIF because I'm going to borrow money essentially from the city.
Build something
based on the money I'm going to make off what I'm going to build. Well, what am I going to build? Well, I don't know. Well, I'm going to put up a hotel. Well, you're putting up a hotel out in the middle of a residential area. Nobody's going to stay there. Okay, then I'm going to put up a hotel, bar, and a casino. That's it. And I'm going to make. You got to make at least $3 million a year to compensate on the property tax for it. Well, I'm going to make $6 million a year. Well, how do you know? Because I'm telling you, that's what's going to go in on that TIF. That's exactly how they work. They're selling blue sky. And it takes the money that actually is supposed to be produced from property taxes on that parcel and sucks it into paying that TIF and deprives other cities services.
And let's assume that the TIF does work and the economic development does happen. Then there's going to be increased government services, and where is the increased government service money going to come from? And that basically means...
That's another problem, yeah.
Well,
increased police services.
Right.
Increased police, increased school, increased...
And we've invested... Indianapolis is very proud of all the investments that have been made in downtown. And we do have a beautiful downtown.
But
it's in a TIF district, and so most of it goes back into what I call our slush funds that essentially let the mayor at his discretion to decide which projects are going to be financed. And as it turns out, they're not. Originally, it was envisioned that it would be done for infrastructure improvement. So if you had to put in new streets and sidewalks and sewer lines and so on to accommodate the new development, that's what it was used for. But now they use TIF money to actually go into the material cost of building the new. They actually give it to the private developer, so public money goes to the private developer to build his project.
That's what's happening at the Busch Stadium site right now.
And
yes.
Just to point out also, Matt was quite astute in his history of TIFs. California has now banned TIFs.
Yes.
Chicago had TIFs. Richie Daley put Chicago into the financial sewer with TIFs.
Well, all of downtown, I mean, it is shocking that most of all of the wealthiest, the highest assessed property in all of Cook County, that whole downtown area, is now virtually all in a TIF district. And Emmanuel was so embarrassed about it that he literally was forking over a bunch of money to the schools and others because they were, they couldn't operate. They didn't have the money. And, I give him credit. He at least took the money out and gave it to them. Now here they say, oh no, you can't use it for those other purposes. It's got to be used.
If there's one difference between Rahm Emanuel and Mayor Ballard, I think Emanuel at least has some backbone to stand up against some of the more vested interests. Not that he is not also bought and sold in many other different ways. But I don't think Mayor Ballard would ever just say, screw it, I'm going to give the library funding since they need it. I think he would just say, well, we can't do it, sorry.
Well, we'd have to be able to contact Mayor Ballard, though, wherever he is.
Well, just go to the next mayor's night out, and then one of his deputies will answer a very vague question, then tell you to see him after the meeting.
Well, or we could Skype him, but I don't know if we could Skype him
from India.
Well, he's not there right now.
He's in India now?
No, he's
he had to cancel that because of the terrorist attack.
He canceled it to get rescheduled.
The town that he was scheduled to visit in India actually had 2 terrorist bomb attacks the day before he was
Last I saw, 11 died, I think.
Yeah.
He should have just, switched to a different foreign country to which he could have traveled to try and entice people to come in for jobs or whatever it is he's trying to do.
Yeah.
So mass transit. We'll wrap up this topic and go to some other things.
And before we wrap up, one comment I want to make is I had the opportunity to watch another competing show, panelist talk show type deal, where they talked about mass transit. And basically the response of all the panelists was, oh, it's a good idea, we need to do it. Every one, Republican, Democrat, media people.
It must be Indiana Week in Review.
I wasn't going to mention the show, but Gary just did. And here we have a great panel discussion about the issue where we're having diverse and original thoughts about things. And I think I just want to commend everybody here. And this is the type of thing that we need to have on the air.
Well, and I think what we have to do in terms of, and that's a good point, but I think what we have to do in terms of any kind of mass transportation system is, first of all, fix what we have, make sure it works, get people acculturated to using the bus. If it works, they will ride. Don't say if you build it, they'll come. That was out in the middle of a cornfield. But if you fix it, they will ride. And if they ride it and become accustomed to the idea that they've reduced mileage on the car, maybe they're paying $80 a month for a bus pass, but it gets people to and from work just fine, and they're saving mileage, they're saving gas and stuff, then all of a sudden you see the bus become a functional part of the social structure.
And I do want to say, as one of these young people that this is supposedly being done for, and I know a lot of young people who have these types of menial jobs or work 2 or 3 different jobs, and I gotta tell you, lots of them have gotten job offers in Fishers or Hamilton and Hamilton County and other surrounding counties. They don't take them because that's too far of a drive or anything. What they will do is they could take a bus and go somewhere else downtown. But I'm not convinced that this plan is being done to help people who are already riding bus to get better service.
Oh, I don't think
and my biggest concern isn't the concept. It's a lot of these nitty-gritty details that really disturb me. And if we get to all these details, I won't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. But right now, I think this proposal is more on the bad than the good side.
Well, I think the proposal itself is.
I would be 100% supportive of expanded Indigo bus routes, especially in the townships that are not currently being serviced very well by Indigo. Well, but that's not being proposed. It's not very sexy to talk about more buses. You'll notice how almost no one is talking about the bus startup in Hamilton County, which is part of this bill. Everyone's talking about the light rail and the stuff like that.
So buses.
Well, and they also neglect to talk about, they did put in that bus service that actually went from Carmel down to downtown, and they discontinued it because it.
Well, then they discontinued it because they didn't deem it. I read it was because of the federal grant right now, and they decided that wasn't worth. And then they reached a problem with the federal grants, but also, they decided that was not worth keeping in public financing. And this is something I talked about when I ran for council, is that so much of our vital city services are tied up with these outside federal grants and stuff like that, and who knows what's going to happen in 2, 3, 4 years down the line to that money.
Well, so I think what we have to do is we have to invest in what we got now, because it's intolerable to have a bus system in a major city where you have to wait an hour for a bus, even during rush hours. I mean, because then by the time, you can't plan your job around that. If you're in Broad Ripple, where the bus goes, it gets there at like 10 till the hour.
It's not getting to downtown that's the problem. It's getting back to Broad Ripple.
Well, I know. And you have to wait. So you get off work, and what? You're going to wait 45 minutes for your bus? And to go to work, you're getting to work maybe half an hour, 45 minutes early. And so you're losing 2 hours of your life that you could be spending with family or friends, doing whatever. And instead, you're spending it on this inefficient system, and what they're wanting to do is spend money instead of making that system more efficient, buy some toys, make some money on the side. So, like, the only, I'll be quick about this, the only rail that's downtown in Indianapolis, other than Amtrak kind of weirdly going through, or CSX, is that train that runs from IU Hospital to Methodist. And everybody was saying, that's really an interesting thing that they did that. Well, you know why they did that? That was so that they could, the owners of the hospitals could save money on labor of the nurses and other healthcare professionals, because they could split up shifts. So those people are going back and forth on that train. That wasn't put there as some kind of good idea for the public.
And the first several years of that, they had tons of problems operationally.
They still do, and it cost, I believe, over $50 million to construct. A lot more than, I think they said it was going to cost $34 million. It wound up costing a lot more, and then it turned out that it was actually designed to be run at a place like Disney World in a mild climate, and
that's obvious.
And that was why they had all the mechanical problems with it, because it couldn't operate in a cold environment in the wintertime. And so
another reason be for global warming, Mark.
Actually, that's another reason to believe that there's global climate change.
All right.
Okay.
Other issues.
New topic. Somebody in
this is where we move on to.
This is where we transit into a different topic.
Yeah, we have the main topic, and now we have several shorter topics we're going to discuss. Current events.
Repeal of the 17th Amendment to the United States Constitution.
Oh, I love this.
Somebody in Georgia. Let me pull my pocket copy of the Constitution of the United States out.
Have you seen the Constitution of Alabama? The Constitution of Alabama. It's ridiculously long. They put the regular laws in the state constitution.
Because you have subclauses to what our rights are. This is the 17th Amendment, basically. Senate of the United States. Well, actually, it's 1, 2, 3 paragraphs. Sarah Palin probably wouldn't be able to memorize it. We directly elected senators via that amendment. Before that, state legislatures elected a state's United States senators. And so the 17th Amendment came in and said, no, you're going to popularly elect senators. They want to change that in Georgia. Paul thinks it's a good idea.
Well, let me clarify that. First of all, you say they want to change it. One legislator introduced this.
And he had a buddy.
Maybe he has a buddy, so maybe it's they. But I didn't say I support it, but they're trying to make a point that the states get run over by the federal government. They get run over. They get told what to do. The federal power was supposed to be limited in the Constitution, and they have completely distorted it over the history of our country, where the federal government's now dictating to states, oh, you got to do this, you got to do that. And what they want to do is to have a stronger state presence protecting their power in Congress. And that's not granted, that's not the way to do it, but the motives are not as evil as you think they are.
Well, but the problem is, back when before the 17th Amendment, most if not all, state legislators were citizen legislators.
Sure.
Even members of Congress were citizen legislators. The problem that you heard complained about a lot back then was essentially when the state legislature was choosing who the state's U.S. senators were, that they were buying. Basically, you could buy a Senate seat.
Well, and that happened in Montana.
Yeah.
That was why Montana enacted the statute that really set the groundwork for election campaign laws. A mine owner was upset with the way in which politics was being run, so he bought a Senate seat.
I wouldn't have a problem with it if state legislatures weren't some of the most corrupt political bodies on the earth. And for all the justified crap that the U.S. Congress gets, I think in some of the state legislatures it's even worse, just because there's almost no oversight in terms of lobbying, in terms of donations. I think in Wyoming has the smallest state legislature, and they have like 10 times as many as lobbyists as they do state legislatures.
And we've got the Illinois governor sitting in prison right now because he tried to sell Barack Obama a Senate seat.
Let's be clear about something. Only 4 of the last 7 governors in the state of Illinois have gone to prison.
Right.
So if you're going to sit there and make negative comments about governors of Illinois,
but that's only because they have prosecutors who do their jobs.
I think
in Illinois. They actually
one just came out.
They actually
the majority.
One of them's out.
I think Jon Stewart said that you have a better chance of being convicted for murder. That you have a better chance of getting away with murder than you do
in Chicago.
Going
That's
to prison
true.
If you become Illinois governor.
That's true because there are so many unsolved murders in Chicago.
And I want to clarify another thing too. Because I think that this goes to show how our legislature here, our General Assembly, is being cleaned up. It used to be said that the way in which to pass a bill through the Indiana General Assembly was by tossing a paper bag full of cash over a transom in the Claypool Hotel in the dead of night. There is no Claypool Hotel anymore. Therefore, there is no corruption.
But used to they had where they had those glass dividers. Where it's like you're looking into the fishbowl tank over at the Senate and the House. Those used to be open. They did not have glass on them, and they complained that lobbyists were passing envelopes over the edge into the.
Well, now you see sporting tickets, Harry and Izzy's gift cards, maybe a St. Elmo's gift certificate, and you just do it outside of cash.
Well, as mayor of Chicago, the mayor who succeeded Harold Washington after Harold Washington died of a heart attack, the guy was a former alderman and succeeded Washington. And in a press conference, somebody asked him, "Is it true that you accepted a bribe in the form of a check for $15,000 when you were an alderman?" And he said, "That's a lie. I would never take a bribe that big in the form of a check."
There you go.
When you deal with honesty in government, you deal with honest expressions and honest statements. But I think that by repealing the 17th Amendment, I think that whatever the aim is, it's misplaced by trying to give a smaller group of people greater say on who's going to sit in the U.S. Senate. Because then it's kind of like, okay, let's do a hybrid of Citizens United. And I think that was just one of the worst decisions.
Well, yeah, and I think you remember when one of the congressional races was coming up, and I think it was in the 5th Congressional District, P.E. McAllister proposed that let's not have a free-for-all Republican primary. Let's just appoint a group of us, 20 elite individuals to go sit in a room, interview the candidates, and let us pick one, and then that'll be our choice. And that's great for him because he was going to be one of the people sitting in the room, and I don't even think he lived in the 5th District.
But as a moderately well-educated white male landowner in this country, I think that if we went back to the days of the framers of the Constitution of the United States, that I would have no adverse interest in it. But I think that would be really a backward way of resolving problems.
What's the next topic, Mark?
Next topic is our break. This is Civil Discourse Now. I'm Mark Small.
I'm Paul Ogden.
Paul, where are we?
We are at Harry C's on the south side near Keystone and Thompson and Carson.
It's 5055 South Dearborn.
Which is sort of a very small street, so you need to give them a bigger street.
Yeah, but you can Google it on maps and stuff.
That's true.
It's really a cool place.
And what is Google?
Google, Barney Google. He was a character in Snuffy Smith.
Okay.
Well, if you take the tube down the interstate web highway, then you get there. The Google.
Oh.
I think it's like Tube 77.
Okay.
We're very appreciative of Harry C's here.
Yeah,
it's a very nice place.
Great place, and we are streaming live on Live 365, but on IndianaTalks.com. It's a network started by Gary Snyder, and it's Indiana-based talk shows, sports shows, political shows. A really neat exercise of the First Amendment. You go to the website there and hit the donate button. You can donate money, and he's not buying a Lamborghini. He told me that already. He's buying software and hardware in order to put this on the internet. Our guest panelists today are Gary Welsh. Gary, you blog at
Advance Indiana.
And you've got a donate button on there too.
I do have one.
Okay, and encourage people to go there. I read your blog. I read Matt's blog. Matt Stone is our guest panelist.
He's not been blogging much.
Yeah, but I have in the
haven't.
past.
It's horrible of me. I let my civic duty down.
You are.
And Matt's our other guest panelist today, and you've both been guest panelists in the past. And I start my day in part by first of all, I check sports, and then
see if the Cubs lost.
No, I mean that's kind of a foregone conclusion. This time of year, it's not so painful. All I'm doing is reading about how bad we're going to be in the coming season. But I'll see it. We'll get to the Pacers in a minute. I'll see who's won and stuff. Then I go over and I pull up Ogden on Politics. I don't read Paul's blog.
You just read what's on it.
He has the link.
And I do the same thing. I use his blog list.
But they don't actually read what I write. They do the little
Paul's
summaries.
like Best Buys is to Amazon.com.
Right.
We kind of get there to see what everybody else is doing, and we buy it someplace else.
Yes, exactly.
He's kind of a showroom.
I actually, when I was doing early Christmas shopping, I was in a Target. I found a speaker set that was the same thing, cheaper on Amazon. I bought it on Amazon on my phone while I was in a Target. So, yeah, it was fun. It was great.
That's really kind of dirty.
It is.
It's kind of ooh.
And I didn't have to pay sales tax.
Don't go there.
Actually, no, you don't want to go there.
You're going to jail.
Okay, next topic.
IMS?
Yes,
We need to talk about that.
the Indianapolis Motor Speedway.
Gary Welsh has written several columns about that this past week. And
It's the home of the world's greatest spectacle in motor racing. And it's never taken a dime of money from the taxpayers of Indianapolis. And it draws 350,000 people thereabouts for the Indianapolis 500 every May. And then 1989, Tony George, who was grandson of Tony Hellman, who had taken...
still his grandson.
Well, yes, that's true, except Tony Hellman's dead.
Yeah, that's right.
Took over management, CEO, and everything of Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and then made some rather questionable moves and spent about $500 million in the course of that, and then was voted out in 2007, I think, as CEO of IMS. And now, the Indianapolis Motor Speedway is...
Well, they are seeking a $100 million welfare grant, public assistance, whatever you want to call it, from the state legislature to make improvements to the facility. Now, what they've sort of relied on as a hook for seeking the request, our U.S. Attorney Joe Hogsett pulled off the shelf an old ADA complaint that had been filed by a local attorney, Greg Fairback, over a decade ago. Most people had forgot about it. He dusted it off, and he met with Speedway officials and said, you're going to have to make some accommodations for the handicapped population to comply with the Americans with Disabilities Act. And so
And frankly, having been out there, yeah, they needed to comply.
Yeah,
they did.
So they reached an agreement to make a certain amount of improvements that were going to run in the tens of millions of dollars. That was announced several months ago. I should back up. The person who had succeeded Tony George as the CEO of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway was replaced by Mark Miles, who had formerly served as the head of the Central Indiana Corporate Partnership, and he also chaired the local Super Bowl committee, and he's been a big advocate of public subsidies for our professional sports organizations, Indianapolis Colts and Indiana Pacers in particular. And some people predicted when he made the move that this was a bad sign, that was an omen that there was going to be a request for
cynicism
for public assistance. Well, as it turned out, news reports tell us that for the past year and a half or so, they've been meeting secretly with lawmakers about a proposal to make up to $100 million in improvements to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. That includes redoing the grandstands to make them ADA compliant, adding lighting to the track. I mean, all race events are currently run in the daylight.
Yeah, but and just to address that for a second, a lot of people had a problem when, in 1994, was the first time they ran the Brickyard. Until then, the Indianapolis Motor Speedway hosted only that race, except for at the very beginning. They hosted a couple of motorcycle races and stuff.
True.
But other than that, after those first few years, the track only hosted the Indianapolis 500. That was it. And I know when I was living in Chicago, I was really concerned about being able to listen to the race on radio. I was asking some people, we were going out to their place. I said, "You guys are going to have the race on your radio, right?" And they said, "Well, yeah, we can pull out a radio and play it." So they did, and it was right towards the end of the race, and it was John Cock and Mears were like running really tight in 82. And I said, "Damn, I'd love to be watching that." And they said, "Well, you can. It's on TV." And I said, "Well, no, it's 500." And they said, "Yeah, it's on TV." They didn't understand that it's always been blacked out here. And even now the 500 is blacked out here. Mario Andretti was really upset when they decided to run the Brickyard here, because the Brickyard should only be for the Indianapolis 500. So they never accepted public money. They'd run it quite profitably, from what I could tell, for all those years.
But they keep their numbers secret.
They've been very secretive with their numbers.
They keep their attendance numbers secret, because I clerked for a law firm that had sued them at one point. A person was killed out there. Wouldn't disclose their numbers as to how many people. Now you can count in the grandstands, and there's imaging software that will look at a group of people in an area and do an estimate, and they're saying it's about 350,000. Now, I was watching Brickyard last summer, and there were empty seats in the grandstands for the Brickyard.
And they've removed a lot, well, I don't want to say a lot, but they've removed some of the stands that they used to have. They've removed a number of the stands, and they don't have the seating capacity they once had. Well, in the third and fourth turns and the second turns, they used to have seating on the infield and all those. They removed what it is. They built these areas where you can sort of lay a blanket down and family areas that you can.
I turn a lap there every year in a Mini. Okay, and I'll have to watch for that this year.
Yeah.
You're walking, you're not driving.
No, I'm walking, but and lots
part of the mini marathon.
Yeah, but they have removed some of the ticketed seating that they had in the infield and the turns, and
But there's no indication that. So going to night racing would be like degrading the track even more. I mean, why not just run midget races out there, meaning the cars? Okay, why
Figure eight.
not?
I like
You do a figure eight. It's making it so cheap, and it's the Indianapolis Motor Speedway.
Well, you were talking about it being able to watch it on TV. For many years, they would not allow a live broadcasting of it. Even anywhere, you could only see it run after like on the evening. They would rerun it at a later time so that people couldn't actually see it live. And Tony Holman always resisted a live broadcast because that was sort of the mystique of being able to go, that you could only see it live if you were actually there to see it in person, and that was a real barrier for them to jump over. I remember that was a real big deal when they finally allowed for a live broadcast, and that wasn't until the 1980s,
It was early
believe,
80s. Yeah.
that they actually allowed for a live broadcast of it.
Yeah, so it's like, so now, it's not like, the only way that they lost money was because Tony George decided that they were going to make all these changes to the track. They had a split between CART, and he did a startup of the Indianapolis Racing League, Indy Racing League, and the estimates are he dropped $500 million on a bonehead deal. So it's not as if the Indianapolis Motor Speedway was losing money, and it's not as if that family isn't making a hell of a lot of money off that track.
Yeah, they invested a lot in getting the Formula One race
because they had to
here, too.
reconfigure the track,
Right.
and they had to deal with Bernie Ecclestone.
Who you had to pay